I would like to be the moderator of the Bunka-cho Art Workshop Session 4. My name is Yukie Kamiya. In this session, our theme is Case Studies for Generating International Dialogue, and that is why from different backgrounds like museums, biennale, art festivals, from different platforms, we have decided to invite 4 curators that are engaging in their work in different platforms. And when we think of communicating about art and culture, since 2018, we have been carrying out this contemporary art platform, but this includes hosting exhibitions, also publishing books of different contents, and also building websites, as well as holding lectures or academic courses. And we are taking different medium. But we don't want this to be a monodirectional communication, but we want to roll this out to be a bidirectional interactive dialogue. So how do we do this? And how are these visions being achieved? And that is why we have these 4 curators that are standing at the front line. And we would like to have them share with us the case studies as well as their ongoing activities, and also raise some tasks and challenges that we could possibly face. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Bunka-cho Art Platform Secretariat, the Bunka-cho people, as well as other staff who have been supporting us for this event. And at the same time, we have from Amsterdam, the first curator to be joining us, which is still early in the morning. And at the same time, we also have curators and speakers who have come over amid the bad weather all the way to Nagoya. And again, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their efforts. So I would like to introduce the 4 curators in the order of their presentation, starting from the founding member of ruangrupa and also currently the artistic director of Documenta 15, hosted in Kassel, Germany. We have Ade Darmawan, who is joining us from Europe.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
And then we also have curator of Aichi Prefectural Museum and curator of Aichi Triennale 2022, Fumiko Nakamura. And followed by curator Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo, Kyongfa. And last but not least, director of Beijing Inside Out Art Museum, and also the artistic director of Yokohama Triennale 2023, Carol Inha Lu. And let me just give you a brief timetable. So we would have a 15 to 20-minute presentation from each of the curators. Then, after a short bio break, we would like to move into discussion more or less around 6 p.m. Japan time. Again, if you have any questions, please drop your messages in the Q&A box, and I would like to take those questions, and we would like to have those questions being answered during the Q&A session, and we encourage you to be very proactive. Now, we would like to move into the presentation. The first speaker, Ade Darmawan, who is now leading the Documenta 15, which will be held up to tomorrow from Kassel, Germany, and he has joined us from Zoom online in Europe. And he is the artistic director of Documenta 15, and he is also a founding member of ruangrupa, that is a art collective established in Jakarta 2000. He himself is an artist and curator, and this ruangrupa is a NPO that provides support in art under the context of city and culture, and they are also practicing various art projects in a cross-disciplinary way. And they have also joined the Gwangju Biennale 2002 and 2018, Istanbul Biennale 2005, Brisbane Asia Pacific Triennale 2012, and 2016 Aichi Triennale. This is how the ruangrupa have been involved. Ade, so the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and it's been really Great. Really sorry I cannot join you guys there. I'm still in Amsterdam, and tomorrow is actually the closing day of the Documenta, so I'll go back. There's a talk here in Amsterdam, and then after that I go back to Kassel, and then closing the finally the Documenta 15 that's already happening for 100 days. So yeah, I'm going to start with again talking about the the Lumbung, that the concept or like method that we practicing during Documenta, and also how it's actually evolved in the preparation for more or less 3 years, and then how it's actually finally emerged in Documenta as exhibition, or what we call it as translation. Can we start the slide? Can we go back to the first one? So, yeah, it's actually, this is a scheme of Lumbung, which is actually based on collective shared resource, collective common resource sharing, which is based on the traditional agraric tradition in Indonesia. It's a rice barn. And in the scheme, you can see how it's actually supposed to be also regenerate and also sustain itself. Next. Yeah, this is the sort of like the drawing or the scheme that is actually how it happened in traditionally in Indonesia. Until now, it's actually happened also still in many villages, but also it practiced actually also in an urban setting. There is a for us, Lumbung is actually not not only an architectural structure, but also as a concept. You know, like Lumbung as a word, for us, it has also a certain cosmologies that it means a lot as well. It means something that you organize yourself in the sharing, and also in generosity and transparency mode in a certain community, or it can be also connected to several communities. Next slide. Yeah, so the idea of the Lumbung is actually coming from a certain entity in either individual or community or families is actually define their sufficiency, and then and also having a self-limit uh, uh, practice, and then that's actually how finally they can also define the surplus. So it's actually a surplus that in agraric culture, of course, it means in many places in Indonesia it's rice. So after the harvest, usually they take from the harvest what they need, which is it means a certain sufficiency or certain limit, and then after that, the surplus is actually go to the storage, or to the lumbung, and then it will be gathered together in one pot, and then will be self-organized in a collective way. Next slide. Uh, of course, during Documenta, we're not farmers, so it's it's a practice that more on knowledge, artistic, and also activism, and so on. So we try to sort of like make the lumbung become something that we can understand better in our practice. So we go into values, and this is actually a 10 values that we recognize from the lumbung practice, which is actually also we already practicing it for some years, or even actually since beginning, but it's not really formatted. It's just like I think the last 5-6 years that we finally formatting a more mechanistic model of lumbung in our collective of collective called Good School. So the values are quite a lot actually. I mean, like there is independency, generosity, transparency, independence, humor also there, ethics as well, and so on. Next slide. Yeah, this is a collective of collective that mentioned before. It's called Good School. It's actually coming from really a needs or necessity as well, how we should survive or how we should sustain as a collective. And in order to do that, we thought that it's really uh, important. Finally, we find a certain mode that we should actually change our working method. And one in this one is actually how we we change it into uh, something that or a platform that more share more based on sharing resources. So we share spaces, tools, equipments, programs. Also, finally, our finance, our money as a resources. So it's actually there is no such a thing as lumbung and an architectural way, but like really also based on the concept that everyone is actually can access every resources that around or like that gather amongst us. And Good School also a platform that as educational platform we finally decide that in order to sustain our practice is it only makes sense that we also have to do in or transfer ourselves in more educational approaches from the natural into cultural approach towards education. So it's actually education platform that based or like focus on a collective studies or a collective practice. So we invite or like we involve several collectives from many different places, Indonesia, and also we start in the last 2 years is actually become international. So we invite several collectives that would like to join with us in 1 year program and then develop or learning from each other how to be more sustainable collective, either in a rural or urban setting or like different setting and different contexts as well. And then we can have like a long session of uh, learning together actually. Next slide. Yeah, this is the one that sort of like a model that we apply in Good School for 6-7 years now. It's basically based on three different practices. There's a unit business or like fundraising or like economic sustainable unit that a group of people actually working on how we can fundraise and then also we can find a different model of sustainability, especially in economy or finance. So there's a shop, there is a canteen, there is also artistic services, festivals, making management, and also art handling. And then the second one on the right bottom is actually all the compound or like the artist collective or arts collective that actually emerge and really a small and medium sort of organizations with its own program. So if you can see from slides, it's actually quite a lot, like not only ruangrupa, serum, and grafis huru-hara, but also sort of like a sub program units and also organizations. You know, there is okay video, there is a, educational platform by Serum, a printmaking studio by Grafis Huru-hara, and so on. And then on the left bottom is the Good School itself, the Good School Collective Studies as a harvest or like as a place where the educational platform, educational model is actually seeing and also overseeing the each practice, and also sort of like harvest and then become a platform of working and learning together with other collectives. So these three is actually basically sort of like the core, and then we have sort of like a lumbung mechanism in the middle, which is based on majelis or assembly that we have routinely. Next slide. Yeah, this is so during the Documenta, we go with as you see, Lumbung itself is actually something that we practice, and then also something that is more like a journey rather than to make an exhibition. So during Documenta, actually, that's actually what we propose. We propose back, or like we invite back Documenta to to join our journey actually. So it's a longer journey than Documenta, and then we are thinking that Documenta 15 is actually just part of the journey itself. And in order to do that, we have a lot of model that or structure that we try also before, which is actually because we grew our practice from the space in many occasions. I think what we do also in Aichi Triennale, for example, we did we opened a educational or like a school in that time for a few months, really working through the space and so on, as our sensorical and our as a method how knowledge is actually evolved with daily life, art, knowledge, and also really connect with bringing the relation also with the local context. So this is during Sonsbeck 2016 that we did also in a smaller scale. Actually, Ruru House happens for 1 year before the actual event. Next slide. Next slide. And again, in Documenta, to make the place where we work in, it's not become a place that neutral. You know, it's for us, it's not only a place, it's also with the people, with the time, with the context of a locality, and so on. So we also sort of like a setting up Ruru House. This is much bigger, of course, than the Sonsbeck. This is Ruru House in Kassel in Germany. We're setting up this space into like 2.5 years ago, and two friends with their families move also to Kassel and then live there until now. I really respect that because it's not easy, of course, because they have to change the whole their journey as well. Making the castle itself not only as a stage, but also, you know, like making it like more down to earth, and then also really making it become local as well, rather than being, because exhibition is very extractive as well. You know, like many big exhibition, it's actually extracting all the resources from many other places, and then putting in one place, or cities, or something like that. So we try to make the place where it's sort of like the venue or like the event place itself become local. That this is actually what of the strategy, and we grew from there as well. Next slide. Yeah, this is how it emerged in the beginning. Next. Yeah, so it's really spreading the connections through daily life, and then bringing also opening up a space for the local activities, initiative, and so on. So it's become also setting up a Lumbung castle, and this is very important because many times Documenta seen as something that also very extractive and also very exploitative towards the local context. So by this, we sort of like grew from the bottom of the, and like on the ground, like really working with the people that is already there and then already experience many things as well in many years. Next slide. Yeah, this is actually basically the inspiration as well, how these things are made, because Lumbung is actually in architecturally, next slide, basically conceived from three spaces function. Like on the top is actually the storage, and then the second part, the middle part, is a living or domestic, and then the last part, the bottom one, is actually a social space. So we inspired by this as well. This is sort of like how we do also many stuff, including websites, and also how we see the castle itself. You know, it's not only about making exhibition, but also like bringing living space and also social space together. Next. Yeah, this is how we are thinking during the process as well. It's because Lumbung is not a theme, it's not a subject that or topics usually in many curatorial approach usually is thematical, and then the works become sort of like illustration of the theme. So we don't have that. We take the theme, which is usually in the middle, so there's nothing really in the middle. Instead, we work from how it's actually should be practiced within the value of Lumbung. So it changed also how we work and how we, in conversation with the artist, for example, we don't, in conversation with the artist, we're not looking particular artwork, for example. We're not really talking about artworks because there's no theme. Instead, we actually in conversation about how they practice their art. You know, like how they, if it's collective, for example, how they decide things, how's their ethics, how their politics, and also how they connect and within a certain ecosystem, how they locally rooted they are, and so on. And for us and the artists, it's more like a mutual relationship rather than sort of like we invite them. It's like mutual relationship or like agreement or like a commitment towards a certain journey rather than making artworks, you know, like so. But sometimes we got this question as well, of course, in because it's this is kind of like a standard conversation between curators and artists. You know, like curators will come up with the theme, and then the artist will ask like which work or like what you want us to do as an artist, or like which work do you want to show. So that sometimes that conversation also happen, but usually we answer it that we don't want them to do a certain things. What we want to do, what we want is actually it's become mutual, and then they just do what they want to do already, and then what the next plan and so on. So it changed also the conversation. It changed also the Documenta economic, and then with that logic, we don't use the commission logic, for example. So it's not a commission. So we use a seed money to respect and also to sort of like give a certain practice of artisan collective a basic needs. It's not all like fully basic needs, of course, but like sort of like something that they can survive with for certain amount of time. And then after that, we we equal the production budget, and then we give also a collective pot that in a group of artists, which I will explain later, is actually sort of self-organized financial amongst the artists. Next slide. Yeah, and then we, this is sort of like emerged from the process that we do several lumbung actually during the process. Next slide. Yeah, this is if you see this actually a group of artists that we sort of like setting. There's no really pretty rational reason. It's just practical because of COVID, and then like most of the process of Documenta is actually based on Zoom. That's why also communication is very important. We know it, and then it's actually based on where they are, which is time. Also in practical reason. So we grouping 5 to 7 artists in one group. We call it mini majelis. If you see there is a group of artists names, that's actually sort of like a mini majelis. And they will, for 2 years, they self-organize their mini majelis, talking to each other, share their contacts, share their struggles, share their strategies, including also share their collective pot. So they can use their collective pot either for production, either for inviting other artists, or even for other stuff, sort of like to give solidarity as well. So this it's not a forced thing. Few artists also doesn't want to do that, which is fine as well. And for example, some, like, there's artists also think that I don't want to use the collective pot money that I have, and then I just give it to others. That's also happened. So it's really a very interesting collaboration happens amongst them during the process of the preparation. I mean, we do this as well. It's Lumbung is really become something that in practice rather than as a team, you know. Like, so it's really like the sharing and the generosity and the transparency is actually being practiced in the during the process of of Documenta. Next slide. Yeah, this is translation. I mean, like, this is one thing that's quite crucial, because again, Documenta 15 is an event, you know, within a time, within a certain of time, which is 100 days. So we call it translation because we know that it's impossible to bring, and it's also extractive and reductionist as well, to bring one practice to from one place to the other and then showing it. I mean, like, that's actually what we experience as well as ruangrupa, as when we curate, or when we as an artist as well, you know, like bringing ruangrupa practice, it's sort of like almost impossible actually. So what we do is actually we call it translation. How it's actually translate to a certain local with a different version, but how it's actually also what's the meaning, or like what resources that we can also bring to the where it's come from. So it's not like one way process, or like one way one direction from the place where it's coming from, and then bringing to the place where it's exhibit. But also we ask ourselves, we ask the artists, we ask the management how it's actually meaningful for Documenta, but what is also meaningful for the local ecosystem back in respective practice. So this is also the translation is means and going. For example, if we bring one practice from, let's say, Jatiwangi as a village in West Java, Indonesia, for example, we bring their practice to Kassel, Germany, but we question as well how to bring the cycle back also to where it's belong in many ways, in many meaning as well, either resources, either knowledge, either experience, and so on. So this can be sort of like become like a full cycle. Next slide. Yeah, so it's really a lot of when we approach this method, like people asking, like, because it doesn't sound like making exhibition. So like a lot of people asking, is there any going to be art, is there any going to be exhibition, and so on. People start to worry about it because what they know about Documenta is exhibition as people know it. But it turns out that it's become exhibition. And it's a big exhibition and a lot of arts, too much. But it's not only that exhibition that we know it, but it's really also a lot of stuff, happenings, events, activities. Artists are really coming from many practice, and really engaging with the people, inviting through the space, bringing their energy as well in the space. So it like really sort of like become like a big conversation or like a big conference where people can gather, meet through space, through activations, and many things. There's a lot of venues also become a living space because as ruangrupa as well, and also as Lumbung, as I mentioned before, it's a very blurry, the line between art and life, private and public, domestic and public as well. So a few venues actually, Friedrichianum, for example, become a living space as well with the dorm from Good School. There's another two, three, four other venues as well. It's actually inhabited by artists. So it's become sort of like a small communities that it's vibrant. This is the Friedrichianum. It's become a school. We call it Fried School, or like Friedrichianum as a school. This is actually one majlis as well, where around more than 10 collectives and artists assembling and then work together with us, making the Friedrichianum become sort of like alternative or like a different model of schooling or education. Next slide. Yeah, this other slide is just like sort of like bringing a different image from the exhibition and also the events. Actually, I'm not going to talk like very detailed, otherwise it's too long. This is from Instar. This is from Banork from Thailand. Next, yeah. Wajuku performance, karaoke. It's a big. I don't know how many songs is actually played in Documenta. It's really a lot, I think, because there's a lot of music. I think maybe it's the most sonic musical Documenta ever. Like a lot of DJs, a lot of musics, happenings, and so on. This is maybe for the first time karaokeing in the back of the Friedrichiano Museum. Serigrafista queer from Argentina. Next. This is one of the Maidan. Yeah. Next. And we have a printing workshop also in the middle of the exhibition space in Documenta Halle. So the idea is actually artists can immediately print what they need for what happened, what they need during the exhibition, either small books, flyers, posters, and so on. From discussions, many discussions, well, many workshops, many cookings, Richard Bell Embassy. Next. Performance by Jumana, Cinema Caravan. They just like I think already ninth or 10 place that they move around during 100 days, nomadically in the city. Black quantum futurism. Next is performance in artist resistance space. This is actually church from Waza. Next, Amol Patio. Next, Wakoko-san, you just like you go on. I just wanna say something about venues because like people, I remember sometimes people also ask how we decide which artists go to which venues. The answer actually we didn't decide. We decide together. We decide together with the artists. So there's a time during the COVID that is the COVID a little bit better. So we managed to bring them over to Kassel, and then we just walk with them around and then showing few spaces that we already have because it's Documenta venues traditionally, and also some others that it's sort of like having potential venues partnership, and also different museums around. So we walk with them, and then they actually the one that decide which venues, and then we having conversation, and then after that the problem is, or like the question, like how if more than one artist or collectives want the same venues. uh, so we make another a majelis of venues. There is a more than, as I remember, at least 3 or 4 venues we need to do majelis, or like assembly, long one, like from maybe every 1 or every 2 weeks we meet as artists, productions, and so on, to negotiate. And there is some several venues is actually need us like half a year to finally everyone agree on the design, or like on the constellation, or like the composition. So it's really based on the conversation, based on assembly as well, which how Lumbung practiced. From few, like last week, there's a one colleague actually bringing counting all the activities until a week before, just like last week, and he found out like there is a 1,200 activities still counting because he counting it actually last week. So like from last week also still a lot of activities happening. It's very engaging, very open, and it's really also, it's something that naturally and also strategically coming from the collective practice itself. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope I'm not taking too much time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ade-san. ありがとうございました。スキームドローイングであるとか、
So like the scheme drawing, the illustrations, the diagrams. So you have really visually showed us the concept, and you have been very communicative. And this has been one of the first kind of dialogues that you have implemented, probably among others. And the ruangrupa's Documenta that is being running now is radically changed or shaking the Documenta, but at the same time not hostile, but rather amicable and peaceful. And of course, the Documenta, including Sonsbeek, or it's so the Lumbung is not just newly applied, but you have already applied this in the past in Aichi Triennale and the Sonbeek, and now this time you have tried to root the concept of the Lumbung practice in Documenta. And from 1990s in the Asia Pacific I think the scenery became really active, and the actions in Indonesia also started to emerge, and that roots back to the ruangrupa activity that you started. And at Rights Academy, when you were learning, there was the Suharto administration, but that was the time that you saw the Suharto administration being collapsing, and people really assembled at the, well, when people are not allowed to assemble or gather, eventually through those assemblies being made, the Suharto administration collapsed, but then you returned to Indonesia, and then that's how you formed and established the Ranrupa, and decades from then, that has grown bigger, and now you have been leading the Documenta, and we are very happy to witness that, and a new platform under the concept of the exhibition has been made with dialogue. Thank you.
Let's go to the next presenter. The previous speaker has been moving from Indonesia to Jakarta to Kassel to do this program, but the next speaker is different. He remains in Aichi. She is originally from Aichi, and she is also the curator of the Aichi Prefectural Museum of Arts, and she therefore continues to be very active in her own home. And she is going to talk about the Aichi Triennale 2022, which is now on. So just briefly about the speaker. So she is a curator of the Aichi Prefectural Museum of Art and also the curator of Aichi Triennale 2022. She is active in Aichi Prefecture and also the Tokai and Kansai area. She's a specialist of the visual culture and photography, and from 2007 she has been working in the museum, and from 2010 she began to be involved in the Aichi Triennale, and she has been working on the relationship between the museum and the audience. Yesterday, it was mentioned that there's Japan Foundation's condition report program, and she was also part of that. Thank you very much for that introduction. As Ms. Kamiya has mentioned, I think that this time the Documenta 15 turns out to be a very thrilling event. I was very much shocked with this kind of new approach, and I think that in the future, I think that this Documenta is going to be long remembered in my career. So after his presentation, which is away from his own hometown, I'm going to talk about the activity that I'm doing here in Aichi, hoping that I'll be able to start or generate international dialogue. So let me start my presentation. First of all, regarding this Aichi Triennale 2022, I would like to give you a background. Well, actually, this is a prehistory of our Triennale. First of all, in Aichi Prefecture, before this Triennale, in 2005, World Exposition Aichi Japan was held right here in Aichi Prefecture. And this was very familiar to the Japanese citizens. And in 2005, when this World Exposition was convened, within this art exposition, there was a comment that maybe we should have enhanced our artistic activities, and therefore, next year, under the leadership of Aichi Prefecture, we started to conceptualize the International Art Festival, and in 2008, International Art Festival Committee was established within the prefectural government, and the first Aichi Triennale was held in 2010. That is to say, the important thing is that this is, this is a triennale which started by the leadership of the Aichi Prefecture, and also before we started the triennale, there was the World Exposition held locally. So this international or World Exposition The art festival, we can say, is something like born from the World Exposition on a regular basis. Actually, Venezia Biennale also started from the exposition in the 19th century, so we can see some commonality. I mean that the art activities and also the exposition, World Exposition seems to have some commonality. The APT Australia has the same kind of the background as far as I know. So, however, the exposition is a nation-based pavilion, and it is to showcase the latest technologies of each country who participated, or we try to bring unfamiliar or unique products and goods in one location. So it is a kind of national prestige and a spectacle, and it is a showcase based on the nation-state framework. Of course, we cannot continue this kind of a framework going forward. Today's theme of discussion is case studies for generating international dialogue. The question we have to ask is how we are able to get away from the exposition, world exposition models which started in 19th century as we try to generate international dialogue. So, this is the outline of the Aichi Triennale 2022. Just briefly. First of all, those are the features. First of all, it covers contemporary art exhibition and performing art and learning. So there are three components. And also, when it comes to the contemporary art exhibitions where I'm involved, there are this year 82 artists from 32 different countries of the world. And out of them, the 41% is Japanese. In terms of the active areas, 33% said that they are active or based in Japan. And if you look at the past triennial, Japanese artists was 41%, and about half of the overseas artists, sorry, about the half of the artists were from outside of Japan. And this time, although we are still under the influence of the COVID-19, however, approximately 60% of artists prepared new works for this triennial. So it's not just that they are bringing new works for this triennial, but all artists are considering very carefully what to be shown this time and made such kind of relevant work. So this is the theme of our Triennale 2022. Still Alive is the title or the outline or the theme. Actually, as you know that this I'm Still Alive is named after the On I'm Still Alive series. The important thing is that the Kawara On, he is the world-acclaimed leader in the area of conceptual art. He is very influential, but at the same time, he is originally from Aichi Prefecture. So he is international, but at the same time, people can feel him very close because he is originally from Aichi Prefecture. The reason for choosing the title relevant to this On Kawara is, as I said, this triennale is led by the leadership of the Aichi Prefecture, and this shows our audience profile. According to the past triennale, approximately 60% of the audience are the Aichi citizens. So, majority is from the Aichi. And what about the overseas people? Actually, in 2010, when we have the first triennale, it was only 0.1%, and in 2013, it grew to 1.3%. And then after that, in 2016, the people who live outside of Aichi Prefecture, including those who live outside of Japan, was 34.1%. So, just looking at this survey, people in Tokyo, people in Osaka, and people in Singapore and Los Angeles, everybody is mixed in one bucket. So the way we took the survey itself was a problem. Anyway, because of the pandemic, we believe that this time the portion of the Aichi Prefectural citizens will be even higher because of this travel restriction. So we will have fewer viewers from outside of Japan. However, even when 60% of the audience are the citizens in Aichi, but at the same time, we have to consider how to connect our exhibition to the international contest and how to provide long-term and also the wide-ranging perspectives. This is going to be our challenge, not just for the Triennale 2020, but also for the future Triennale. So, in the past, we have always included overseas curators as part of the curator teams. However, this time, because of the COVID-19 and as you know, the travel restrictions, it is difficult to travel abroad, and therefore, we set up the curatorial team only consisting of Japanese curators. So you see the names of the three people, Ida, Nakamura, and Tsutsumi. Three of us consisted the curatorial team. However, this time we tried to get the help from overseas curators by inviting curatorial advisors, appointing curatorial advisors. And those overseas curatorial advisors were able to get us introduced to the overseas artists where particularly we're not familiar. Because of that, we're able to select the artists and the work much broader than in the past. The curatorial team was not enough to have an extensive research physically. However, with the help of those curatorial advisors in various parts of the world, we are able to get lots of information and referral. As a result, we are able to collect a wide range of artists and their works. I think I would say that this is a happy side effect of the COVID-19. So let us show you some of the works that we were able to find as a result of the input from the curatorial advisors. So this one, for example, Rita Ponce de Leon. She is a Peruvian based in Mexico. In Japan, the Peru and Mexico is not so known. Even so, she made the work with many people, and those are the works that promote the communication with the viewers. It is on the 10th floor. Lane sticks and xylophones were used, and the interview and the dialogue was done to collect those words on the xylophone and the lane stick, and the viewers can feel it and hear it and enjoy the work. This is another mode of dialogue. This is the work of Arakawa Shu Saku, who is a conceptual artist based in New York. He is originally from Nagoya. The other artist, Mary Dapalani, she is a woman of the Mandarpui tribe of the Australia. She created a mat used for rituals. These two artists have nothing to do in common. However, if you put their works side by side, you will be surprised because those works visually similar and at the same time both have common theme. For example, how to go beyond the allotted life by the god or destiny. In the case of the Arakawa, he described his theme as reversible destiny. by using the word of reversible destiny, he tried to explain his theme. And Mary also says that the people can go beyond the allotted longevity by the soul of the ancestors, because the ancestor soul is connecting the past and present and future. This is a totally different work. While Aichi people or Japan are not familiar with those things, this is a history about the hairstyle. By looking at the hairstyle, we'll be able to have a new information about the history. The artist is Liliana Angro Cortez. She came from Colombia for this work. This is about the Americas continent, and this is regarding the hairstyle issue. There are slaves who were brought from Africa originally, and they used hairstyle of their braided hair as a kind of a symbols or the signs for communication for secret information. So she looked at the hairstyles. Today, we may think that the thread hair or the braided hair is just a fashion, but actually it has a history of having used as a secret communication among the slaves. So those are just the three of the examples that we're showing this time. However, you would know that those works, those places, or those artists are not necessarily familiar to the people in Aichi. However, when the work is done together with the local people, when the viewers can actually touch the work, or when the work is shown together with our own local artist, or when the work is based on something very normal or part of your daily life, like a fashion, and that makes it possible for the local people to understand those cultures or those works. So far has been the input from the curatorial advisor. So this is to bring the overseas culture or the arts to Japan or Aichi. And now, how about showing our art from this part of Japan to the rest of the world? So here, the important thing is not just this museum, but we have satellite venues like Ichinomiya and Arimatsu and Seto and Tokoname. We have done exhibitions in those satellites. Ichinomiya is famous for the textile industry, Arimatsu for the handcrafts, and Seto and Tokoname known for the ceramic industry. And actually, the Tokai region, there are many avant-garde activities. So, how to critically interpret the local industry and history and culture of those cities and then try to rearrange them in a different context. And at the same time, the local people living in those cities have to consider their identities by learning their own history and culture. So it's a great opportunity for the locals as well. And they will also realize that the local identity is dynamic and it can change depending on how you see it. So let me give you a couple of examples of that. For example, this is the Tokoname venue, Tamura Yuichiro's work entitled Invisible Hand. Here, he's talking about the nobility. It's a figurine made of ceramics. To the right hand, you will be able to see nobility. Nobility is a delicate form of ceramic dolls with very delicate paintings. And oftentimes they are modeled after the Europeans in the 70s and 80s gorgeous costume. So in Tokoname and Seta, many of them were produced like this, and they were exported to various parts of the world, including the USA. Particularly after the World War II, this export of those nobilities peaked. And artist Tamura says that it's very interesting that the Americans are very much yawning the European court culture but the Japanese ceramic technologies were utilized to build those nobilities. And this nobility industry actually from 1980s gradually started to decline as an industry. And this is because of the fact that the yen became stronger to the US dollars, and eventually our nobilities lost competitiveness. And from here, Tamura started to say that the reason for the decline of the nobility was the Plaza Agreement in 1985, which was achieved at the Plaza Hotel in New York in 1985. And therefore, he created the nobility of the five ministers of finance who reached the Plaza Agreement. And then this was shown in the settings of the puppet show of Ningyo Joruri of Japanese culture. So you will understand the world economic system, which is very much difficult for us to understand. And then the Ichinomiya, the textile is even today very active. Particularly the wool industry, wool textile. Ichinomiya is even today #1 in those industry. And if you go to Ichinomiya, there are many things that shows that sheep has much to do with that because sheep is a material of the wool. But on the other hand, this is the area where the Tokugawa government harshly prosecuted the Christianity, but people have almost forgotten this tragedy. And the wool industry became very much important in modern time in Japan because this is when Japanese military started to make an aggression into the northern part, and that is a time that they needed the warm textile like wool. The ship is very charming and it is used as a material of the wool. However, the ship is also the symbol of Christianity. But on the other hand, this city of Ichinomiya has much to do with the military and also the persecution of Christianity. And when we think about the avant-garde of Nagoya, we picked up Kishimoto Sayako. She is the avant-garde activist. She is a junior to Arakawa Shu Saku and Akasegawa Genpei, and also a member of the Neo-Dada. And one of the features of her work is not only she is doing the painting. Painting was used as a kind of a stage for her, and she makes a rather radical performance in front of that. But her performance is not just radical, but she is advocating the departure from the patriarchy and also the love-based revolution. So in our today's environment, we know that she is not just radical because of the surgence of the feminism and activism. So her work is very interesting. So this time, Kishimoto's message, we have included the message as a political candidate, and that is also part of the installation, and you'll be able to hear or see the translation of her message that has been translated by the Bunka-cho. So we are not trying to pick up some of the examples of the local cities with their own histories, the cultural background. And these works not only introduce and promote the particular local culture, but also try to criticize its singularity. And then they focus on the multiple contexts hidden there. The dialogue arises from here. We think that we can make a good starting point of the dialogue from this kind of approach. So Now, I think that you have understood that what is seemingly the homogeneity of various cities are just superficial. Now, I'd like to give you such an example that shows that we assume that the localities are seemingly the same, but actually it's not. If you look at the Aichi Prefecture, only after Tokyo, we have many non-Japanese living in Aichi Prefecture, including the migratory workers. So, not just the English, but also using other languages, we have offered multiple language tours as our first trial. Every time, those triennale can attract about 500,000 people or 600,000 people. And you may think that, the access of the public to this program is maybe just a small number of people, because it says, for example, of the Spanish course, there was only one people who wanted to participate. However, actually, you would know that even in this part of Japan, there are many non-Japanese people with mixed blood or the different ethnicity. It was an eye-opening finding. Art scene is also oftentimes considered to be global, but on the other hand, this Aichi Triennale and the art festivals, of course, we need to have the support from the local residents to have this kind of event. And we are showing specialized and high context works, but at the same time, we'll be able to disclose and expose those works to so many people. That is to say, we are able to break down the dichotomy between the local and global, and also the general public and the specified and specialized the studies and researches. You see four quadrants here. They are not separated. We can realize there's good circulation among the four. So, local event can be also be used in the international context, and at the same time, a macro world global international event can be also shown and presented to the local residents in this part of Japan. And when we have a good circulation among those four, the positions of people will be also changed, which is very much interesting. For example, the important thing is that, the 19th century exposition-based way to show the arts by packaging the locality and the vernacularity, it's no longer relevant. It is important that we understand the dynamism of those four quadrants, and that this dynamism gives us a hint for international dialogue. And that's the beauty of the triennale. Thank you very much.
中村さん、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Ms. Nakamura.
ね、ローカルオーディエンスが 60% という非常に高いパーセンテージの中でどのように国際展を行っていくか、加藤さんをアーティスティックディレクターに、中村さんはじめとしたキュレートリアルの皆さんの、努力の、一つの形が、我々今拝見できる、わけです。パラシュート型とよく、言われました。90年代から、たくさん増えた、ビエンナーレをするのに飛行機で降りて、そのまま短期間滞在しリサーチをする、そうしたことではなくてアドバイザーという、その土地に暮らす人々を一つの指南役にしながら、情報を、ダイアログを紡ぎながら、展覧会を作りゆく情報を得て、それを形にしていく。そして地域の歴史や文化というものをアーティストによって再利用、再発見することで、新しい視点を取り込んでいくというのが、今回 この愛知の中で、
So this is what
注意しながら
was
なさった
something
こと
that
という、い
they
ろいろ、学ぶことが
they
できま
have
した。
paid
では
special
同じ、
attention.
美術館のキュレーターながら、愛知か
Now,
ら、場
the
所を、
similar
日本の首都
the
東京に移
profession
して、
of
ご
the
紹介いただき
curators
ま
of
し
the
ょう。
museum,
チ
but
ェ・
now
キョン
we
ファさん、
move
東京
from
都現代美術館
Aichi
の、
to
学芸
Tokyo.
員でいらっしゃいます。
Ms. Che Kyongfa,
2000年
the
ロンドン、
curator
ロンドン大学
of
ゴールド
the
スミスカレッジで、
MCAT,
博士号を、
she
そし
had
て、取得
the
後2006
PhD
年
degree
バル
in
モ
the
アートアカ
London
デ
College
ミ
of
ーで、
Art,
クリティカル
and
スタディーズを、
also
修了なさっ
they
ている。
had
インディペンデントキュレーターとしても、
completed
ソウル、ジャ
the
カルタ、オス
study
ロ、アムステルダムと非常にさまざまな土地
she
でご
has
活躍
been
なさって、
curating various
2013年より
events
美術館に入られて、
from the
展覧会をなさ
international
っている。
organization, and
その
since
チョン・キョンハさん
the
から、東京都現代美術館におけ
2013,
る
she
発
is
信というも
now
のを、
working
ご紹介いただきま
at
す。よろしくお願い
MCAT.
します。
Now, she will talk about the here and now. Sorry, I haven't obtained a PhD yet. Just a little correction, but thank you for the kind introduction. I am a curator of the MCAT, Che Kyongfa. In the last workshop, I attended as one of the participants on the floor and listened to the presentations. But today I was invited as one of the presentator, and I'm very nervous to hear. In order for generating international dialogue, given a theme, the utilizing the institutional space of the museum, the international exchange case study is going to be shared with you. I would like to, talk about several co-curated, the exhibition held, in MCAT. But before that, let me give you the overview of the MCAT. We succeeded. The Metropolitan Museum, built in 1926, and succeeded. There are 3,000, the artworks, and was established in Kotoku in Tokyo. The current, the collection is about 5,500, items. And covering the post-war Japanese the arts trend, and also collect the current the work of the art the and the exhibition floor extends to 7,400 square the meter, and with the the planned theme, we have the 3 to 4 times collection exhibition with a theme, specific theme. For the exhibition, the 6 to 8 times per year, not limited to the contemporary art, including the fashion design, architecture, and animation. And sometimes, we receive the proposal from the outside entity and host some, the exhibition as well. I myself have been working here in responsible for the exhibitions and the curation of them, and mainly in the working with the the Museum of Japan and the overseas, co-curating with other curators. The first co-curation the work was soon after I came to the MCAT, that I proposed, and was organized between 2015 and 2016, titled Time of Others. The MCAT and the National Museum of Art, Osaka, Singapore Art Museum, and Queensland Art Galleries co-curated, and the Japan Foundation Asian Center organized, and the Azusa Hashimoto, Michelle Hor, and Liu Ben Kihan, who is here today, were involved, and they closely cooperated, and we made a tour around those the institutions. Here,
it was one response of the dynamic change of the geopolitical situation in Asia, and how the difference or the otherness is constructed, and that was raised as a theme. Because of the limited time, I can't go into the details of the works, but the collection of the existing collection works were utilized of each museum, and also try to sharing the interest in the researches of the each the curators of the museum, and the spending 2 years for the preparation of the selecting the artist and the works to be exhibited. Uh, Another the curatorial or the collaboration with the curator, the cadist, which is a state in it is the in Paris, NPO, the over 5 years, there are three, the exhibitions are planned. The cadist has its headquartered in Paris and the uh, U.S. and developing various the programs, including the exhibition and educational programs as well. They are NPO. One of the curators and the board member of the cadist visited us Tokyo and proposed some the activity of the collaboration, and that was the start. The the actually the our museum for the renovation was temporarily closed from the 14. Therefore, a satellite exhibition was planned. It is a small scale, and the site was the Tokyo University of Arts in Ueno, Tokyo. This is some of the scene from the sorry, because of the time, I will skip the explanation. In this, the exhibit, what does it mean for the artist to relate to the society? And the five artists, the work, the installation were, the exhibited in a small space, and participatory installation and work were, the also exhibited. The next the exhibit also co-curated was exhibited in the Paris Cadist venue. Mr. Hikaru Fuji's solo exhibit, "The Nucleus and the Thing," was the title. The the left hand side is the exhibition scene. The work that was exhibited here was they made in 2017 when he visited Fukushima and had the conference of the the curators engaged in the the disaster the affected the cultural assets and the the political scientist, the nuclear, the scientist, and the Hiroshima, the art, the atomic bomb, the museum curators, etc. 13, they gathered together and discussed about the response of the, the arts to the, the disaster and its memory and the record and those the uh, discussion and from the preparatory stage was documented and filmed. And this right hand side is the filming of the preparation of this discussion meeting. Well, right before this event, the French and specialists visited Futabamachi in Fukushima of the folklore museum. They visited the folklore museum, and in the context of France, this issue was discussed, and it was a 3 hour straight, very heated discussion. And that whole process was recorded in the film, and that was the represented or the presented in the next round of the exhibition that were held in Tokyo. In 2019, the NCAT was, they renovated and reopened, and the third of the series of the co-curation, production was the Things Entangling. That is the title of the exhibition. Uh, that and when it was about to start, the pandemic, has started. Neither artists nor curators were able to come to Japan, and Zoom were not yet, the prevailing as the means of, the communication and the sharing. So we had a hard time, and so we set up the preparation. However, the museum itself was closed for 3 months. So we had much difficulty, but the core of the planning was the same. Mr. Fuji is the Fukushima uh, reactor incident, and Futabamachi, the cultural asset of the folklore museum, and the Mr. Fuji's work on these cultural assets that had to be evacuated to other place, and it's the video is one of the main the stream, and from there the artists the work the what art can they relate itself to those social the memory and the the record or the catastrophe became one of the core. This is a place where the artworks exhibited the depend on each other without hanged on the the wall. This is also the conceptual the installation. The another work of the collaboration, which is now I'm engaged, uh, the is the collaboration with a specific artist, Wendelin van Oldenwolf, the Netherlands artist, uh, living in Berlin. Uh, Solo exhibition, and she's been in Japan since summer this year. And we have been preparing the new work, to be presented in this solo exhibit. It is not the exhibit of the memories, but we trying to make the currently prepared work as the main, the feature. Actually, she studied the colonial the control the occupation in Brazil and in the the Asia, and also the the female the architect and the the artist the um, activities they record the film was made, and also they make the the dialogue as one of the major component in her the work. It is an example scene from her work. This time what we were preparing is since 1920s, the two the famous the writer, female writer, the Fumiko Hayashi and Nobuko and Miyamoto. And they both died, passed away in 1951. But until then, they produced many novels and the essays, diaries, letters, but which includes some of their the thought about the difficulty of living as a woman and the conflict of their Marxist ideology and their own agendas, and also the the criticism against fascism from their perspective then. Um, so these texts were, they read in depth, and we picked up some or the extracted some excerpt, and asked the the several the participants, to read a certain passage out from the text. The act of reading, the text, and how does it affect the subjectivity or the the existence of the readers. They are filmed and they're represented in the form is one of the attempt that we are now making. So that was the case study of the the collaborative work. The exhibition framework differs from one to another, and how the the collaboration the start also is affected by the coincidence or the the accidental the history. However, my guidance in the collaborational or the collaborative work is that including a curation of various artistic activity and the practice, the the and I would like to pursue the question of what is the contemporary question that I can or that we can share with the audience of the Tokyo and Japan, and by presenting this exhibition. And if this was my motivation, the time of others is the network expansion with the Asian organization and institution was the purpose. Um, but the almost the equally important was our response, the one response to the very exclusionary nationalism that was spreading very rapidly in this regions. After that, Cadiz's the von der Lein's the um, collaboration, especially the things entangled that was prepared in 2020 Tokyo, when Tokyo was busy or occupied with the preparation of the hosting Olympics, and we asked ourselves what should be the question that we should raise there. The Van Oldenburg's and the collaboration between us, the motivation that or the necessity for her to throw the exhibition in Tokyo. And she had confided me that her mother was born in Jogjakarta in Indonesia. And when the Japanese army occupied Indonesia, she was 8 years old. No, no, and she became the hostage of the war or the prisoner of the war, and stayed until the end of the war. And about her the sister Miss Fanna Oldenburg, and borrowing her word, she said that the one empire and another empire met in Indonesia, and said that it was the the kind of origin for her the pursuit of the life, and that's why she was interested in Japan, and also that they led her to find the Hayashi, Fumiko Hayashi, and the Yuriko Miyamoto. Probably I'm running out of time, but maybe the last comment. I know that there are several additional points that I would like to make, and since this is the communication here in curation. Of course, the curators and the artists' way of working and their interest and aim need to be incorporated, and try to make the the equal and open dialogues between us is the key of the success. However, having said that, the dialogue is affected by the institutional policy and the organization, and the people or the human and financial resources that is given to the collaboration, not only the size of the collaboration, but the depth and of a collaboration and the quality is also affected. The last year's in the workshop, I heard many curators' voice and the researchers discussion and writing. Those curatorial work is our responsibility, but the overall, the exhibition management and the huge clerical work or the back office work are also, the imposed on the curators. Simply, it reflects the institutional attitude that professionalism and the expertise of the curators are not recognized in the current the system, and that will certainly be detrimental to the motivation and the quality of the curators. Um, because I ran out of time, I would like to share with the rest of my opinions in the discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Chang Kenfer. The depth of the collaboration and how the far and deep you can continue dialogue. The long-term collaboration, like 3 years, 5 years, the long-term the collaboration, and also the collaboration with the institution and the artists, the overseas in the form of the commissioned work. And she introduced us, the new way of the collaboration. Thank you.
Last speaker, I'd like to introduce Ms. Carol-Inha Lu. Just briefly, her biography. In 2023, next year, Yokohama Triennale is going to be held, and together with the artist Judy, she's going to serve as the artistic director. And for the first time, she had done the research in Japan. She got the PhD of the art history in the Melbourne, and also she is working as a director of the In and Out, a senior creator from 2015. She has been working on that, and from 2005 and 2007, she has very active as an art historian and also the art critic. And he has made a contribution to many works, and also she is working as a contributor to many papers. She is currently based in Beijing, but she is going to talk about the project that she is involved in, and also, if possible, she can share with us what would be the challenges of the future, future exhibitions.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Yukie, for the kind introduction and for the invitation to participate in this panel discussion. It's a great honor for me to meet so many colleagues, not only in Japan, but also from elsewhere. I also want to thank the Agency for Cultural Affairs for all its logistics support. There is no better place for me to start discussing generating international dialogue than an exhibition that Kamiya-san and I both were involved in. Back in 2013, the Goethe Institute in Seoul invited curators from Japan, Korea, mainland China, and Taiwan to explore the notion of harmony. The touring exhibition, titled Discordant Harmony from Seoul to Hiroshima to Taipei. Sorry, I'm just showing some images. To Beijing eventually was the result of this endeavor, aiming to widen the opportunities for a dialogue in East Asia. For me, the invitation came right after my participation as one of the 6 Asian co-artistic directors of the 8th Gwangju Biennale in 2012. I emerged from the experience feeling frustrated It revealed to me how little we knew each other among Asian neighbors. Worse even, there was neither interest nor curiosity to explore. We were constantly referring to Western Europe and North America for models of practices and theoretical frameworks. We assumed and accepted their universality as a given rather than perceived it as a construct. I became conscious of my own ignorance and eager to correct that. The opportunity to work side by side with Yukie Kamiya, Kim Sang-jung, and Qian Hong Huang on discordant harmony afforded such an opportunity to further my exploration. Apart from the exhibition, we initiated a research element where each of us interviewed writers, artists, and thinkers on the notion of Asia, drawing from their understanding, analysis, and historical knowledge. The research was filmed and became an important backbone for the exhibitions. The construct of Asia and its consequences was also discussed through artworks in the exhibitions. We gave careful considerations to the cultural and historical specificities of each city and venue in order to make each edition relevant to its local content. This was not done by adding local artists to the exhibition, but we actually gave each exhibition a different thematic focus and selections of artworks. In the final stop, we decided to introduce a historical perspective into the show by revisiting East Asia at a turn from the 1980s to the 1990s. During this historical period, those living in East Asia not only witnessed the end of the Cold War and felt its impact. One of such was increasing globalization. We also experienced profound transformations within the societies, political systems, economies, and cultures, along with new conditions. Instead of just presenting artworks in the exhibition, we selected particular exhibition projects and art events of that time as case studies to examine and reflect the complexities of that era. We wanted to understand how art and thoughts of those important years have continued to influence us today and related to each other across these regions. To be specific, Qian Hong Huang from Taiwan presented the works of 3 Taiwanese artists. Through them, he intended to address the resistance to and contemplation of nihilism in the information and consumer society in Taiwan in the 1980s and the 1990s. Sang-jung Kim revisited the exhibition Plastic Spring. At the moment, she described as Korean art world encountering the international. The purpose of this exhibition was to keep a distance from the popular political art and the trend against art for art's sake. In her assessment, this show empowered Korean artists to connect their practices to a broader international context. Yukie focuses on the Ginbra art and Shinjuku shonen art, 2 art events that took place on Japanese streets as a new platform for alternative art in the 1990s. The participants then were young Japanese artists active in the 90s. The time saw massive building of museums under the economic boom, but young artists were often excluded from both local art institutions and overseas exhibitions. Frustrated by this condition, they spontaneously began the critique of the gallery system and initiated participatory art and curatorial practices. I curated the Chinese section, starting from the mid-1980s and focusing on 4 case studies, which included 1 art newspaper, 2 exhibitions organized by artists, and 1 art fair. I wanted to analyze the intellectual motivations behind such historical events and how they shaped our subsequent formation of the art system, including its basis of evaluation of art. I argued that what they proposed back then still continue to influence our art structure until today, which is highly commercial and simultaneously co-opted by state ideology. This historical analysis only contained a very limited choice of examples from each region, but it did present the beginning of a formation of what we know as the contemporary art world today in each local context. During our working process, we understand that we needed a better set of theoretical tools to analyze the confusion and challenges that we face working in Asia. For this purpose, we invited Professor Naki Sakai and Chinese scholar of Japanese intellectual history, Professor Sun Ge, to have a dialogue as part of the exhibition in Beijing. This discursive event put forward the notion of Asia and Asian theories as an intellectual horizon for understanding contemporary cultural practices in Asia. As such, it has the potential to problematize existing categories and orders, and thus provide windows into the contemplation of subjectivity rooted in our regional experiences. Both historical and intellectual perspectives were introduced into such a project of international exchanges. These tools helped lift us from the usual approach of simply sampling some works and grouping artworks from different cultural contexts under a title broad enough to relate to each artist. This project led us to engage a little bit deeper with each other, understanding where each other has come from intellectually and historically is critical to developing a specific and meaningful dialogue between different cultures. Now I want to speak a little bit about the specific conditions in China. Like elsewhere in Asia, China rode the wave of fast globalization in the 1990s under a very specific set of political conditions. In post-1989 Chinese society, for varied reasons, economy was promoted by the government, but also embraced by Chinese intellectuals and artistic community as the new agency for social change. While many Chinese artists were celebrated mainly in democratic and developed countries in the world as examples of defiance and opposition towards the Chinese state, closer examinations of historical facts reveal that these artists and their thinking were very much aligned with state ideology of that time. Professor Wang Hui, an intellectual of Chinese intellectual of Chinese literature history, has described post-1989 Chinese society as one being driven onto a depoliticized course of development. The Chinese contemporary art world was going through the same intellectual turn of giving up on pursuing meaning, keeping a distance from political and social reality. In a text I wrote in 2017 for Efflux Journal, I described the participation of Chinese artists in the global art activities and communities since the 1990s as a simultaneous process of did internationalization. What I meant was that even in the 1980s, a period which many witnesses describe as a process of learning from the West, the view of individual practitioners in China, their mindset towards understanding, judging, referencing, and learning Western modern and postmodern art was very much based on a materialist standpoint and gleaned from short-term utilitarianism. The art scene's acceptance of the West and the international was not much different from the vision by the government. Did Westernization has to a certain extent been a part of every step of China's modernization process. Constantly expounding on and shaping dominant culture has served as the process of establishing the party's leadership in the Chinese intellectual and cultural fields. In coming into contact with curators and institutional structures of mostly developed countries, some Chinese artists and curators felt that they could not really participate in terms of having equal discussions. They were chosen and defined in a certain way, like being served as spring rolls, a side dish in a banquet of internationalism. In 1991, the patriotic education campaign was initiated in China and carried out in full scale in 1994, especially in primary and middle schools across the country. They make a list of 100 patriotic films, 100 patriotic songs, 100 patriotic books, and introduce weekly rituals of worshiping the national flag into schools with a goal to boost the nation's spirit, enhance national spirit, and foster self-esteem and pride. As a result, a process of de-Westernization and growth of nationalism kicked off in the larger society. The 1990s alienated artists and intellectuals from the political agenda of the government, even though they were mobilized and implicated by such an agenda. They could no longer play a critical and active role in defining it. The perpetuation of pragmatism and the industrialization of intellectual and artistic practice aggravated such a divorce. In his observation on China's intellectual landscape in the 1990s, Wang Hui raises an important difference from the 1980s, namely that the intellectual scene, which saw itself as the cultural elite and oracle of the 1980s, had by the 1990s quickly realized that they were no longer the cultural elites and shapers of value in contemporary China, and that they needed a means of adapting and confronting the ubiquitous commercial culture. This sense of being unfit also permeated the field of art. One striking change was the increasing development of the market and its increasingly visible role as a force in the art system, which was contemplated by the emergence of some curators, critics, and artists who became actively engaged in the progression of the market orientation of contemporary art. They all share the goal of restoring more social space for contemporary art practice, with the belief that by demonstrating contemporary art's commercial potential, they could win more possibilities for expression and practice. They also drew inspiration from their limited understanding of the Western art system, believing the West to be a highly commercial society in which foundations, galleries, museums, and other institutions work together to promote the commercialization of art. This understanding and thinking led them to actively engage in the project of commodifying and commercializing art. Curators and art agents began to work together to devise exhibitions, name categories, canons of artistic creation, and categorize and brand artists. Gradually, they lost their initial sense of purpose and put market success and social popularity ahead of ideas and social agency of art. They and the art community in China internalize such a market-based ideology, and I argue that that has very lasting impact. I have spent some time summarizing the situation in China now. I want to spend the rest of my time today discussing a parallel phenomenon in the global art context, which is the rising presence of an influence of international biennales since the 1990s. It is a product of increasing globalization and development of creative industry as a global concept. Curatorial models developed through such occasions became widespread through this network of curators and artists moving through major international biennales. Since this time, it's become common practice that curators of contemporary exhibitions, especially in international biennales, to take the approach of cultural studies. The objective, the original objective of cultural studies is to understand culture in all its complex forms and analyzing the social and political context in which culture manifests itself appeal to contemporary artists and curators. So such approaches appeal to contemporary artists and curators. It also significantly expanded the sphere of artistic concerns and practices. In the meantime, cultural study is a side of both study, analyze, political criticism. But the fast speed of global circulation and production of exhibitions led to the application of theories and analyze tools from cultural studies, but often it lacks a deeper and historical engagement with the issues at hand. This problem is aggravated by postmodernism and its rejection of lineage, any form of lineage. The relevance of local art history and historical knowledge of a specific context became less significant than touching upon popular themes circulating on the surface of the world. It flattens discussions and reflections. This has become a very critical issue that we need to reflect on if we were to develop further a meaningful international exchange. And I believe a workshop like this one is a great occasion for such critical reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for your presentation. Based on your own project, you have made a very articulated explanation, and also you have set a good theme for the discussion that follows after this deep engagement. Yes. And as Kyongfa-san has mentioned, a dialogue. In the spirit of the rapidly expanding globalization, we shouldn't just have a superficial dialogue, but we will look at the forgotten local history and also the dialogue with the historical knowledge. We have to find how to do this kind of a dialogue involving the people in the room and also the Zoom participants, hoping that we're going to have a good discussion after a 5 minutes discussion. Sorry, 5 minutes of break. Thank you very much for the speakers for their insightful speeches. Thank you very much. We will have a 5 minutes break until the 6:30. Please have a 5 minutes break. Thank you very much.
So we have got various presentations and a lot of insights. And when we think of dialogue exchange and a new network and relationship, well, that's both a dream and aspiration that we have. And that's how we get engaged with exhibitions and art, and we continuously communicate those messages. But there are also some critical things as well, and that's what we would also like to include in the discussion, especially after the outbreak of COVID. Our daily livings are changing day by day, and we're seeing some disparity, and there is still a wall and a big division that is dividing people. And again, we have to be rethinking about our ethnicity and our race, and that's the kind of situation that we are facing now. So how can art make a deep engagement and be a medium to come up with a dialogue? So of course, public institution, and as a platform, we also have art festivals. And what kind of roles can art itself play? And that's what we would like to hear from the panelists, and also get to know from the participants. Especially yesterday, we also took some questions, and the social contribution is what we heard as a keyword. And we could also say that as a public contribution, and that's how we can also relate and think about how we can relate that with art and dialogue, and also create things. And you could also include your current situation. So Ade-san, thank you for waiting, and let me cast a question to you, or could you respond to what I have mentioned? Any views on what I have mentioned now?
Yeah, thank you. I think there is several things that I can maybe add or point out here. I think art should be, in order to do that, like really having more open and also conceptually and also aesthetically blur itself in in a daily life or in life itself, because there is a I think there has been so much exclusivity and also so much wall and borders that it's been drawn by the art institution, either it's museum, how it's educate, and also education like art school, for example. So I think it's really important to break that and really become sort of like a more open and more conceptually also more open and inclusive, because there is so many things that it's also already systemic in itself, and it's already happened in many years that it's become like that. I mean, like modern artists tend to categorize and then also tend to disconnect art from life and so on. So I think that's why also with this Lumbung, for example, it's sort of like a bringing back also the question, like in a certain moment we have a like very strong reason to become modern, and then maybe the because like for example in Indonesian context, that's like how we actually is a part of our independence struggle, to be modern and also to speak with the same language with the oppressor. It's sort of like it's a strong reason in that time. But like maybe for the contemporary context now, maybe we should also question that, like what is it to be in this life, in the modern life. I think that's why also we evident we experience a lot of oppression and also exploitation in in many places, resulting contemporary realities right now. So I think an art should just not as being questioned, but I think a lot of art doesn't have ability or should have ability to really speak from itself rather than, or like practicing rather than sort of like always making sort of like superficial reflecting or symbolic. I think I will go more into like less symbolic and more doing or like more practicing rather than uh, rather than sort of like making sort of like a superficial discourses, which is I don't think it will change. And then we go back to this question again, like you just mentioned, like we keep on questioning, like what's the role of art in society and so on. This question has been questioned, I think, in the last 2 decades, maybe. I think we should have really a more radical answer to it. Yeah.
実際の、アクション。
So when we think of taking actions, and that becomes radical. Thank you. I would like to ask other speakers for their views and thoughts.
Ms. Kyongfa? Mr. Kamiya, Ms. Kamiya talked about the division, and that often, it's the kind of the attack to the the vulnerable people or the marginalized people, and that was when such the attack or the oppression is the visualized, then it appears as the division, and that is what we see often in various societies. And against such the phenomena, what can we do? What can art do? Including my own position in Japan, I have to think about it. And division. So how you think about the division is the first question that we need to ask ourselves. The within the limitation of the museum as an institution and the very highly systematized the space, what can we or should we do? That is the next step question, to express something or to make the representation of the minority. That's not what I want to do or what I try to say. The semi-public sphere is the museum, and what can we share there? By sharing the discourse, even if it is not visible, maybe we can influence some change in the consciousness or the awareness and the social trend. That's what I personally think. However, the various systems, the museum, for example, the success and outcome of the event and the exhibition is the judged by the metrics, the number of the visitors and the size of the income. That does not reflect the impact of the quality. And maybe that the same is the true for not only museum the project, but the art festival the etc. as well. Carol?
Actually, even though we are taking a lot of kind of as you would probably notice that in my presentation, I was emphasizing the kind of reference to historical perspectives over and over again. And the reason for that is not to be nostalgic about certain historical facts or periods the motivation of historical revisits is absolutely to confront and address issues at hand in the present. And as we have experienced in the past 3 years, and even a slightly expanded time frame, is a lot of challenges of and complexities of international politics as well as society situations. These challenges and these problems have deep roots in the 20th century. And that is really one of the aspect of our conception for the Yokohama Triennale. 20 years have passed since the beginning of the 21st century, and the problems we have encountered today should be traced back to the formations of many ideas and many forms of institutions and many forms of authorities that came into being in the 20th century. So we want to revisit those legacies and constructs of the 20th century. And such constructs includes the notion of nation state, the notion of forms of institutions, the notion of, for example, creative industry, the notions of so-called institutions based on collective forms. So there are constructs from the 20th century that we have internalized and become the basis or the kind of preconditions for our actions and our judgments today. But we need to really critically reassess those legacies. So that's the kind of confrontation and the emergency of the problems in the present is a motivation to revisit the past. And I also want to talk about the kind of necessity to reclaim the intellectual and political agency, social agency of art, because one of the kind of consequence of increasing globalization since the 1990s is the marketization of art. And the so-called art system, we have believed or we have come to kind of give too much importance to the so-called art system, which consists of what we usually know as the collectors and museums, all these institutions. But we really need to seriously interrogate these agencies and to reevaluate if they are really playing a positive role in our assessment and our understanding of art. I want to kind of kind of bring in the idea of individual agency into our discussion, not only the agency of so-called institutions, but what kind of agency each of us as participants and practitioner in the art system can bring to the fore to rethink and to enact certain more fundamental perceptions and changes.
ソーシャルエージェンシーとしての、アート、そしてその
The art as a social agency and also the art as a platform. Yes, it is a very much important point. It's a big theme, particularly from the 1990s, when we consider the exhibitions in Asia Pacific. I think that as a one of the legacies, and actually I'd like to ask the same question to the audience. From 1993, we have had those the exhibitions, and there was a Brisbane Triennale AP in Queensland, and we are looking at the legacies from the 1990s. And there's Ruben Kehan here. He has been observing the Triennale, and so I think that if you could have something that you would like to share with us, including the agency role and the public contribution of us, anything that you would like to say. So I'd like to ask Ruben-san to say a few words.
Thank you so much for asking me to speak. I think in the context of the evolution of biennials, the APT is in an interesting position. With its first edition in 1993, it's a little bit between waves of the development of the structure of biennials and their kind of their, in particular, their curatorial framework. And by that, I mean that it's more contemporaneous with, say, the Asian Art Show in Fukuoka, which is an institutional structure with a curatorial staff and curatorial advisors that are more or less consistent across a number of editions of the exhibition, as opposed to the model where you have an artistic director that changes each time. And I think that has affected the character of APT in that sense. In particular, I think in terms of the modes of research, and on one hand, it's an institutional exhibition. It's an exhibition that's staged by and in a state museum, and that means that certain aspects of the institution are overlaid on the exhibition structure itself. But it also means that it avoids the impulse that that Carol mentioned earlier of curators not responding to local art histories or contexts, and instead looking for sympathies in themes that may be considered to be universal or contemporaneous at a particular moment. So that's the space that we occupy, and that structure has shifted over time. In the early editions in the 1990s, when the museum itself did not feel immediately comfortable with representing this kind of vast region of the Asia Pacific, it invited curatorial advisors from each of the contexts that it worked with to propose and select artists for the exhibition. But in the 2000s, that model shifted for a couple of reasons. One, the initial funding for the exhibition expired. New sources needed to be found. So the exhibition needed to become a bit lighter and more flexible in the way that it operated. The second was the creation of a specialized staff within the institution. So the institution now felt confident that its own staff had the capacities to be able to research the region. And the third was the institutional imperative to collect work. And collecting meant that there was an additional capacity to bring in works from around the region. I think that that structure has maybe shifted again over the past 10 years during the time that I've worked on the APT, where it's a bit more of a hybrid in terms of the approach of working with people within the institution, but increasingly opening up to other voices to ensure that the authoritative voice of the institution is maybe tempered a little bit. And that's done through a number of different programs. But I think importantly, where in the 1990s, the curatorial advisors were often eminent people within the field, historians, curators, art critics, artists. While we still involve people working in those areas, there's also a much greater commitment to working with communities to develop projects. And partly that's a response to the nature of artists' projects. Artists themselves are interested in collaborating with communities. But partly it's a recognition of the location of practice that and the space of the construction of meaning, which isn't something that necessarily occurs between a studio and a white cube, particularly with a lot of the contexts that we're working with, where art actually has an operative function within society. And it's important, I suppose, in particularly with works that rely on more more of a customary practice where they're deeply entwined with knowledge, forms of knowledge, and custodianship of knowledge, that those contexts are actually adequately represented within the museum. But I have to say, it's always a struggle. It's always a dynamic process. But I think it's important when we talk about the contemporaneity of art, that we don't just work with a genre of contemporary art, like this construct called your contemporary art or Gendai Bijutsu, that we look at firstly something that Chelsea alluded to, this idea of simultaneity, this dojise, the contemporaneity as happening at the same time, but also to recognize the power imbalances and the different proximities in terms of the global distribution of access to these mechanisms of legitimization, marketization, monetization that might actually occur. And that we think of, I mean, a term that I guess I've been working with lately is actuality. In terms of actually looking at the concrete relationships of power that occur within this idea of contemporaneity or the existence at the same time. But important too to give voice to that multiplicity. So I hope that's summarized maybe my perspectives on the sort of the shifts in focus and I suppose some of the challenges that we have. I don't think that they're isolated within our exhibition. I think it's something that's shared across our community of art practitioners. But I do think that it's important to recognize these as dynamic processes and that we're not looking for essences as such, but we recognize that we're in a sort of a shifting and changing world and respond to it accordingly.
Thank you very much. どなたかレスポンスいただけるような方いらっしゃいますでしょうか。
Do we have any participants who would like to respond to this? Especially in yesterday's discussion, the M plus and John's the Contemporary Museum in Korea was being raised, and we always have the global art and international art in collection. So the word global and international is being used frequently. And when we think of the historical context and dialogue, so how can this be considered in new contemporary art museum? That's what we would like to hear from someone. I just suddenly raised a question to everyone.
If either PD or Miss Jong-Ul-san, yeah, if you can give the comment as a new institution, after having this kind of history since 90s, yeah, how you can comment on the discussion, including Ruben's comment.
Thank you for the presentation. And then actually I was totally agree with what Carol was mentioned before, and also Ruben's. I think there should be more diverse ideas of a art professional who are making exhibitions and collecting works and so on. So as me working as a curator for the public art museum, I've been always thinking that what is the future of the public art institutions. So that's why I've been initiating the Asia project with a several series of workshops to bring people in the space, because I had a kind of fear that end up these public art institutions became a storage of the art collection somehow. If there is no people getting inspired or have a reason to visit. So I've been discussing a lot with the artists and other curators about how we could change the role of the public art institutions, and how to share what we have, because relatively we are quite stable in budget-wise and human resources and everything. But then when we are making exhibitions with other parties, there was a certain expectation from the museum system that also Kyongfa mentioned about, like whenever there is an evaluations on the project of the museums, it is always depends on quantity rather than quality. So those kind of aspect we always have to think of, but still we want to take a or change the new roles of the museums. So it has been always a constant to, or whenever I had to make projects in the museum. So that's why we are trying to do different kinds of experiments through the our project, and yeah. So that's what I've been thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the great presentation and the great comment from Rubens. I just want to add in something like for the what make a museum so exciting is like we have the collection, and we can contextual the collection in the different way in different time, and we cannot expect one exhibition can solve all the problem. If you say something through the show, not satisfied, make another show. That's how we created to survive and how we keep having the momentum to work. But I want to draw this attention talking about the 21st century, how institution could be. But I also want to emphasize the differences, especially I got quite inspired with the three great presentation this morning talking about how Japanese art being presented internationally. And that's really making me feel, because that bring a very interesting question, like what's the kind of the national show still function in the, we say, in the next the decade. But I just also, my observation, like why the national show were so important in the 90s, and because like many of them, we are from different nations, we have the different education and different cultural background. And then the whole 90s, the art world is quite talking about the recognition and talking about being confirmed. But the thing about since the globalization changed quite a lot of the 90s, I mean, the generation who was born and educated there, be honest, like most of the artists after 1990s, basically they are trained by like 20 or 30 art schools. Basically, they share the same way of the education from St. Martin to Slade to NYU. So basically on that level, what's this kind of the national show will function, and how the museums feel like a global art museum to be react this kind of new reality. So for me, like as a 21st century global art museum, we are not talking about this kind of the national recognition, but also be talking about how can we, while we talking about nationality, national cultural features, can we talking about how as a cross region, cross identity at a new era, how we face this kind of the common issues we all face, or can we slightly change our angle from the national more to cosmopolitan? I'm quite also quite enjoyed the contemporaries sharing the same thing, and the sharing the same time, the time and the space. So I just feel when we change this kind of our angle from the to this kind of cosmopolitanism, that could be bring more possibility, and that we try to achieve, we try to explore in the M plus our collection and the collection display. Yeah, thank you.
ありがとうございます。一つそうですね、我々こうスタンダライゼーションという、
So we have this standardization and homogenization. We have this resistance against that. And as Nakamura-san said, and there is also reusage and recognition of the local and history, and that's how it continuously converts. And this relates to a very deep action and discussion. Now, do we have any responses or feedback to these responses, to these discussions? Ruben, please.
So I don't want to hog the floor, but just one thing that occurred to me based on Pili's comment about something shared, and it was a reflection that came from the artist session yesterday, and particularly a comment that I think Kanaya-san from MES made. And it was in particular about the experience of the pandemic. And the comment that she made was that for the younger generation of artists, the impact of the pandemic was like that of the earthquake and tsunami in 2011 for a slightly older generation of artists. And I think to a degree that will be true. But I think what's characteristic about the pandemic is that it was global. It is global. It is still global. And it's an experience that's been shared across the world with variations depending on context. But I do think that it's interesting that there is this younger generation of artists worldwide who have gone through, if not exactly the same, a similar or at least shared or comparable experience. And I'm really interested to see what becomes of that in the coming years. So I do think that it's important that we focus on the younger generation at this point when we're talking about cultural exchange, because they have this unique experience.
なるほど。ここでまた新しいジェネレーションとの対話というのを
Also have to consider the dialogue and discussion with the new generation, the younger generation. Yes, that's a good point too. So, do we have anyone who would like to say a few words here?
Well, the division, cosmopolitanism, globalization, these were, they're often, the voiced, but recently, I often talk with my colleagues in the museum. And I think it, responded to, what Ms. Nakamura said. In Tokyo, the 14 million population is residing in the city, and about 4% are non-Japanese, 510,000 in number. Considering that, the number of the non-Japanese visiting the museums, of course, there are many in the numbers. However, considering the environment in Tokyo, pre-pandemic, most of them are the visiting Tokyo. And we made a survey or the questionnaire and try to make the statistics of the non-Japanese visitors or the viewers. But actually, we cannot see the difference in the questionnaire, because those who are living non-Japanese, and many of them are the Chinese and from Southeast Asia. So you cannot differentiate the difference from the looks or from the and the eastern the Tokyo has the high percentage of the population of Southeast Asia, and when if they are visiting the museum for the tourists of the non-Japanese nationality, it is not. In the post-war, the art collection is the held in our museum, and as a museum who has the post-war the artworks, how we can introduce those works to the non-Japanese population residing in Tokyo. The national art history that Ruben said that among the young generation artist activities, when you look at it, Pakistan, Japan, and some, the artist has the dual background of Pakistan, Japan, or the artist born and grown up with the Korean and the Chinese root. So how we are going to, the grasp and appreciate their, their activity as an artist, the how they can map or the located in the Japanese art maps. That's part of my responsibility, and I'd like to share it with other curators thinking of the internationalization. Thank you for your comment. Ms. Nakamura, also proposed the similar, content.
Would you like to have something that you like to wish? Thank you. Earlier, we discussed the global art history issue and also the international perspectives to tell the stories of the collection that we own. And that reminds me of something, and that is in 1930s and 1940s, there are works from those times, and they are maybe a nice-looking portrait of people or the landscape painting. However, those are the paintings influenced by the propaganda or the militarism back in 30s and 40s. And in the past, we used to show them as a great work, but at different times, we show that this is we intentionally removed because they are influenced by the militarism. And we now live in a situation where we have many different people with diverse backgrounds. And under such circumstances, how are we going to show those potentially controversial works? And when we saw, when I present those arts, I need to explain what is my perspective over deciding whether we should show it or not. I see, even in Japan, you have to diversify the art history, even within Japan. It's no longer just a single story. That's, I think, is your point. What is the population of Tokyo? Was it? Yes, 14 million. It was said that the population of Tokyo is 14 million. And Yamaguchi is a smaller, prefecture. The population is much smaller. But here is someone who is very active in Yamaguchi, and that person is working in the institution while deeply engaged with the community, and that's Barto-san. So we'd like to ask him to say a few words, particularly with Ade. I think that you are working with the Ade in Indonesia, and you are now working in Indonesia and working in a rather rigid institution, the institution with rather rigid rules. So if you have anything that you would like to share with us?
Yeah. I thought working with ruangrupa is difficult, but I just put it there. Yeah, I think the first time when I start working in here, it was like operating like a completely different machine, like which I realize it's not the case when I'm doing activities with Ade and friends in ruangrupa. And I think when we talk about the role of the institution, we should hear my own voice. Sorry. yeah, I think when we talking about the role of like art institutions, there are certain power that we hold, especially in Japanese context, which I think we don't use it to exercise what we can do to change or to help the society, you know, transition towards some things like social issues, political issues, economical issues. I was quite naive when I was first came and thinking like, you know, I can bring some of my experience working with ruangrupa and implement it here. But then the reality was much more complicated than that, and which I think it's also interesting. But what I'm realizing is also there is this certain this institution, whatever you name it, museum, art centers, institution, it's already been there, existed for 20, 30 years, which then somehow creating this trap in the system. You know, I don't know if there's any institution that could say to the directors or to the government foundation to say like, let's stop for 1 year and let's rethinking how we actually, you know, progressing in for the community. It's really difficult to be there, and I think it relates to what Kyongfa has been mentioned about the scale, like how we evaluating ourselves, not based on numbers but based on like what kind of relationship we build with the communities around. It was something that, you know, it needs a major change, because I didn't say like we shouldn't make any other exhibition or we should stop like making, you know, collection based exhibition. It's not about that, but then how we could, you know, shifting our mindset, you know, to see what kind of things that we can actually did. And then I think reflecting, I didn't go to Castle, so probably some of you much more know better about Documenta situation. But I think what Documenta has been offered, it's like it's an alternative, you know, system, working methods that probably, you know, because we've been trapped in this kind of system for so long, we don't have that imaginations to, you know, like, oh, there's a possibility to do that. So I'm taking like Documenta as my advantage now, working in my institution, like to give the example for the people. Like, so there's a possibility of doing like, you know, artistic production with this method. You know, it's not something wrong, and it's, you know, it's been happening in Documenta, which is, you know, one of the highest event right now. So, you know, but then again, it needs to be in a constant discussion. I don't think we can do it like one event and then, you know, things change, because the structure has been that rigid for so long. So what I think, like what I can do now, it's trying to build a discussion, a conversation with the locals, and also how to opening the resource to the inside of the institution. And I think it's much more important rather than making just one project then end, because otherwise we keep, you know, trapped inside this capitalistic mode of production. And what's more important then is to make sure that from the top to the bottom is like everyone understand about this, especially I think everyone that's working with the, you know, as a public institution knows how difficult to work in the Japanese bureaucracy. No offense for the Bunka-cho. but yeah, it's true because then as a curator, as a director, we basically like a disposable material. Like once our contract finished, we go. And then if it's not changed from the top, like, you know, the institution will keep just repeating the same situation. So yeah, I think it's kind of like correlating with all of these changes that happening, you know, after the pandemic. You know, younger generation of artists and curators is started to developing their own ways of working. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to take and there's a lot to discuss. But I think the most important part is like when when we want to do it. Like practically. Especially with the closest people. And yeah, I think just to uh, closing my statement, I just still remembering a big idiom that I found in ruangrupa when I first joining them, which is like, if good art is for all, then it surely should start on the streets we walk. So it's kind of like reflecting on my practice right now. So yeah, it's tough.
Thank you. Yes, alternative system. It takes time to create. 片岡さん、手が挙がっていますのでお願いします。
I see your hands up, Kataoka-san. Well, it's not my comment necessarily, but tomorrow in the morning, we're going to have a wrap-up session, so you'll have an opportunity to talk. But those of you who are leaving today, and actually there are 3 such people who will not be coming, Naria-san, Nose-san, and Suzuki Kota. You're not coming back in the morning tomorrow, and therefore I think I'd like to give the floor to those 3 people. What are your takeaways after 2 days sessions? And of course, you can make direct comments to the presentation made today. So anyway, I'd like to give the floor to 3 people who will be not coming back tomorrow. Well, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity. Thank you very much for me to give a chance to speak up. Well, I've listened to many people's ideas and think they are very insightful. Not just limiting to the exhibitions, but our work is to present and project the works to the society, and the many things that we have to consider. For example, the local art scene, what is their expectation, and also what are the expectation or demands from the global, and what is the needs of the academia and the government, and also the audience. The desire and needs and demands of those parties are very much difficult, and we have to hit the right balance as we always do. And then, and also those demands and needs are changing at a very rapid pace of maybe every 3 years or 5 years. So sometimes we are overwhelmed by the work. Yesterday, Furuichi-san, I think it was Furuichi-san, she made a presentation, and that was totally new to me. And that was, the Japanese work in terms of the promoting Japanese work. And Lube-san also said something that I didn't know about Japan, like things what happened in 1990s. So after listening to them, what I realized is that the most important thing is maybe to give it a shot and try to do something as a practitioner. That is very much important rather than trying to find always the right answer, just one answer to the problems. We have the accumulation of many people's practices, and we are continuing to work to do our work as the as a people who are projecting the arts to the audience, wide audience. Well, thank you very much. I am Nasser from the Toyota City Museum of Arts. Thank you very much for the past 2 days. I have also learned a great deal. For the museum I'm working for, it is located in the town where one company is very much dominant, and there are many non-Japanese workers, although it is not a big city because of those factories and the company dominating this city. And in 2008, there was 100th anniversary of the immigration from Brazil, and at that time we created the modern art exhibition of Brazil, and in that sense. Well, actually, back in those days, our Toyota City was number one in terms of the number of the Brazilian immigrants, and those people used to work at the production line of the automobiles. I personally love Brazil, so I visited Brazil a couple of times for research, and when I get to go to the embassy to get the visa, I see many friendly Brazilian people. I do love Brazilian people; they are very nice and friendly. But in the city of Toyota, I don't know the current situation, but the crime rate and also the suicide rate of the Brazilians are very high back in 2008. When it comes to the suicide, well, because many people came here to work apart from their families, and sometimes they have to work in the night shift. And when you are not, exposed to the day life, sometimes you develop depression. Maybe that's why the suicidal rate is so high. But anyway, so when we had the Brazilian contemporary exhibition, at that time, we thought that, well, we are expecting that, many Brazilians living in Toyota would come and see the exhibition. So I assume that the target audience should be the Brazilian immigrants. However, when we opened the exhibition, actually, we are disappointed because very few Brazilians came. Most of the audience were the Japanese people. So maybe we failed to have a good communication and engagement of the local communities. We just had a stereotype. We just thought that just presenting the Brazilian artists would attract the attention of the Brazilian. In Sao Paulo, we had a stencil production artist, and he did the workshop in the primary school into the city. And those kids were able to speak only Portuguese. And this artist was Monica. And those kids were very much expected that this workshop was successful. However, very few Brazilians came to the museum. So this is a strong reflection of our curation. But at the same time, as Bout has mentioned, actually, how to have a good relationship and build a good relationship with the community. This is something that we should continue. We should not avoid this task. What we are now trying is to involve a Japanese artist so that we'll be able to have a good relationship with the local community so that we can have this relationship to be forged maybe for 10 years or 15 years to come. So in using this approach, we are trying to change our approach. As one of the curator in a typical Japanese industrial city, this is what I'd like to realize going forward.
Thank you. I don't know if I can answer, any of the question raised today. The session. Well, I was a responsible part of the session today, and hearing the presentation and the Mr. Ade's the diagrams, and the artist presentation yesterday. So every time I had the gift of the serendipity and had the insight and stimulus. It was very interesting for me. If you talk with the people who works for the institution, and between them, the problem is that the topic is gradually merged to the very mundane topics that you can encounter on the major TV station news or the major newspaper. But so by listening to those presentation, you can find more microscopic, more the real problems embedded in the the daily lives, and that may have the possibility for the new new finding or the discovery. Mr. Rubin said that listening to the wide younger artist is worthwhile. I think so. With instead of the asking, seeing that you're a doctor and trying to find the problem with a young artist, it's the relation is inverse. You are the patient, or I am the patient, and we need to listen the voice of the artist to find out what our problem is now. Thank you. This is just an impression.
So I would like to now ask Ade to give us a wrap-up session, because tomorrow the Documenta 15 is going to be ending. So have you been able to establish the alternative system? That's what we like to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everyone who give us like a lot of thoughts as well. I mean, like, yeah, in the process of like in Documenta, I think I mentioned also before, this is like a crash of between two systems, like two operating system. I mean, like we have a Lumbung model, which is it has a certain concept, methods, and way of working, values as well. With it's with trying to apply with more rigid and existing for many years as well. I mean, like Documenta, it's also Federiciano is also museum and so on, which has its own traditional production logic, economic logic, and so on. It's been lots of friction, of course, because and then we have to change. Of course, in Documenta, like as artistic director, you have a sort of like a freedom to sort of like to navigate a lot of stuff. But in some points or in many points, it just doesn't work because it has a certain logic, which is, I think, basically for me there is at least two point, which is institutional structure that it's very vertical, of course, very hierarchical, and while Lumbung is very horizontal, very decentralized, and really coming from a different value as well, for example. So we try to change actually quite a lot, like how we communicate, how we communicate with the press, with the media, how we see also audience, how we see space, how we see the city as well, and so on, which is even going to the really quite detail on like how we setting up contract, for example, with the artists, because as I mentioned before, it's not in a commission logic, which for them it's kind of like a very surprising as well. So we based on the commitment, for example, of a certain principles. So it's not about bilateral between the producer or the institution, the GmbH Documenta with the artist, but it's sort of like a two ways mutual agreement rather than one actually contracting the other one. So these like small things that we change as well. I mean, so it's quite a lot of works, and some failed, some not, because it's quite a lot, and Lumbung itself, we maintain it as more like holistic approaches. So there is this one crash in institutional structure, actually, which is tradition on certain way of working, which is state and very obviously very hierarchical, while we actually working in more horizontal. And the second is actually the economic behind it. I think when Kyongfa talking about public, which is more quantitative and so on, like it's really also based on that, like Documenta, it's been always based on the ticketing selling, ticket selling as well, which is, and then it's become all of the economic model, or like the business model itself. It's really, it's very risky. It's very risky actually to to be infiltrated in by art market influence or taste, or even political interest, for example, because it has unbalanced sort of proportion towards the public money, and also the big chunk of financial support that it needs to be raised from, let's say, ticket selling, tours, books, publication, and so on and so forth. So this, I think, one of the key point as well, how such an institution, or like event, or like even museum have to, I call it, surrender towards how they should deal with the curatorial model, or like how they should deal with audience, for example. I think it's really relevant to back again, like what's for whom the museum is actually serving, like, and then where is the art in it? Where is it? Where we put the art and culture in this constellation, right? I think that's a very valid questions for many institutions, either museum events, big events, school even. So, and that's why also we try to change that, because we know also, I mean, like, that's actually our initial ideas, how not to make art institution extractive and exploitative, because it's very centralistic and very exploitative in the nature of the institution structure itself. And it's actually, that's how all the things that in details in the organization structures, in management, how the institution deal with all the stuff like space, audience, and even the artist has become exploitative as well. So I think that's a big question on the institution, I think. The other thing is actually the practice, like I think museum, it's been, or the events like Documenta, it's designed for a certain way of working, or like a certain way of how people perceive arts, while art itself is very progressive and very developed always. Like what about the practice which is exists and doesn't need, or doesn't produce or create it for the museum, which is a lot now. I think what about that practice? Is how museum can keep with that practice, because most of the museums still design on a certain way, is actually basically also coming from how art is actually produced, right? So this is a few things that I would like to add on that, which is it's not easy, but I think we have to change our practice in the arts institution, and also, and it's without new economic model or other economic model which is more generous, less extractive and less exploitative. I think we cannot reach another phase or another evolution of a museum. Let's say if you go in the context of Asia Pacific Museum, I mean, like, I can see, I mean, I've been the last few years back and forth Europe, Asia, and so on. Like, you can see how this anxiety of museum here in Europe trying to explore and self-critique themselves with the decolonial strategy, and then also really trying to experiment a lot of stuff, and also analyzing many things, what we do, what we've done actually in the region, while art institution in the in Asia actually mostly still really looking or like imagining having illusion to become a Western institution. So it's sort of like like one goes like imagining something else in the West, in the European, and then Europe is actually trying to go somewhere as well. I don't know. We'll see how it goes in the. Maybe it will meet in the middle and overlapping. But this is what I see still. I think I can imagine like a Lumbung, for example, will maybe adapt superficially in Europe, maybe quicker, faster, because they have resources and also having sort of a certain direction towards commons, and also making institution more alive, really engage with the surroundings, with the society, rather than sort of like hierarchical, and then also very uh, strictly pedagogical, bottom up, top down sort of approach, and trying to be more bottom up with the engagement of the people and public and society, and more local as well. So yeah, I think we'll see how it's actually we can raise that question, and then also even like really change the institutional practice. Yeah. Sorry, takes too long. Thank you, Yuki-san.
Thank you.
So through Lumbung, you have shared with us the challenges that you have gone through with Documenta 15, and we should bring back this to our own institutions. And there has been one question being raised from Peter Anderson from Getty Institution. This is for you, Ade. So the Lumbung that you have been carrying out is like the social sculpture that is in the German context. Ade, this is just a comment, and actually we have a next topic on the agenda in 20 minutes, and thank you very much. You have to go, right? So thank you very much for staying with us, Ade. And hereby we would like to conclude session 4.
Thank you.
And thank you, our valued panelists, and thank you, our prestigious participants, and thank you, interpreters as well. And our gratitude also goes to the technical team. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow and have fruitful discussions. Thank you. Thank you, panelists. Hereby we would like to conclude session 4.